Hello, everyone, and we are back for another Yap versus Yap. I'm joined by your friend and mine, Mr. Matthew Socey of WFYI and Film Sociology, House of Blues, and so
Blues
many.
House Party. I don't want to give Dan Aykroyd money.
Yes, and tell folks where they can follow you or hear your shows.
All right, you can hear the Blues House Party Saturday nights at 7 on WFYI 90.1 FM or WFYI.org. Film Sociology is on, usually post every Friday afternoon, evening on WFYI.org. I also produce and I'm another voice in a show called Stolen Moments, which is Sundays at 6, Tuesdays at 8 on 90.1. I'm on Facebook, on Twitter, at Matthew Socey, and and I'm on the streets.
Randomly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not doing a show right now, so I'm glad to be back on the streets.
So we are here to talk about Macbeth, the Tragedy of Macbeth, which is the new Joel Coen, not Joel and Ethan Coen, just right. Joel,
a Coen brother film.
Yeah, and I'm not sure have they ever done a solo? Have they ever split off from each other? I know there's been like a screenplay where like one contributed but the others did not.
Correct. But no, this is the first solo directing job for Joel.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So as we record this, we actually just saw the movie last week, although we saw it very early before it's coming out around Christmas time. So I'm not exactly sure when this is going to air. It depends on the embargo that they lay on us. But we want to get our thoughts down while we had them. Or I should say my thoughts, which I realize that I am very much in the minority on the Tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Coen. And I'll just state my opinions, hot takes, if you will, which is, I admit, when I saw that Joel Coen is going to be making a version of the Tragedy of Macbeth and not like an ironic or set in modern times or adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth, my response was, fucking why? And literally, like, why are you doing that? And with his usual cast of characters, of course, the great Frances McDormand and a lot of the other people that he's worked with starring in this. And it sort of struck me when Greta Gerwig, after her amazing debut film Lady Bird, decided for her second film to do the 8th screen adaptation of Little Women. I was just like, that doesn't seem like an interesting or bold or innovative choice for me. And I'm just like, it's such an iconic piece of literature and intellectual property, if you want to use that modern slang. And I was just like, so I admit, I went into the film with a very sort of negative feeling about why this movie needed to exist. And I came out of it unchanged on that opinion, even though it's beautifully acted. It's done in this very sort of spare style with minimal sets and extras, so very much sort of like they're not trying to make it look like a stage production of Macbeth, but with those bookends that you have with a stage production. We have limited scope. You can't see beyond the frame, or in this case of the stage of the theater. And there's very much that sense of it's black and white, beautiful. A number of people have compared it to, what was the other filmmaker you guys compared it to?
Orson Welles did a film version of Macbeth. There's also been comparisons to Fritz Lang. Very, very, I say very black and white. It's shot entirely on sound stages, and it has that look. Yeah. Wells would have some sound stages, but then he would be crazy enough to go to like actually Scotland to film stuff, and then he'd run out of money and he'd go and appear in an American movie for a couple of days and then take the money and finish his films. So, but no, it has a very old school Wellesian Lang-ish look about it.
Yeah, my thought was actually Ingmar Bergman, if you're familiar with sort of like the
there's a bit of that too, and of course Bergman has directed many Shakespeare plays over his time.
Pete Bergman, probably like 50s, early 60s.
Yeah,
very much a focus on the faces of the characters, and people not so much in this case, not really, if they're really not about the backgrounds, because there really aren't any backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out of it with still a pretty negative experience, which is, I don't know, and I should say, obviously, I'm speaking to you, who's obviously very much a theater buff, someone who directs, stars in stage productions his whole life. I had similar discussions, disagreements with our friend Lou Harry, who of course is a theater critic and playwright himself. So I kind of knew that I was not going to agree with a lot of people, just because my opinions on Shakespeare on film in 2021 basically are, at least to you guys, and I think to a lot of people who are, of an intellectual, cultural bent, are heresy. And I know they are. But my feeling is just, it doesn't work. The language is just too dense. It's such, it's been around for 400 plus years. It's been adapted on screen literally tens of thousands of times, if not hundreds of thousands of times, and on film many, many times. So, you're going into this with, it's the story of Hansel and Gretel. Let's do a movie about Hansel and Gretel in 2021, but we're not going to make it like an action movie or
they did already.
Yeah, it's just, no, we're just going to do this straight Hansel and Gretel. I'm like, why do I need to see this? So the line, when we come out of the things for press screenings, we have the press representative there who's asked to take quotes from it to see if there's anything they can use. And my line that I said to them, I did come up with on the spur of the moment, although I wrote it down afterwards. I said, watching this is like, it's a photograph of a painting, of a sculpture, of a play about a dead guy on screen. And I said, it's artifice behind artifice behind artifice. There's just so many layers of construct between me and this material that I have no emotional engagement to it. It's strictly just, it's poetry, beautiful sounding language, even though I would challenge that I would bet at most people comprehend 50% of what's said. I don't know why I don't. I'll start with this. I don't think Shakespeare on film works anymore in 2021.
Yeah. Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah.
As a Coen film once said.
Yeah. And again, I realize as I say this that I am committing cultural heresy, and I come across as a lowbrow numbskull, which
no, you're a highbrow numbskull.
Yeah, but I've talked enough. Why? I know you like this. I think every other critic who came out of the screening had a positive reaction to it. In some cases, very, very positive. So let me just end my rant and turn it over to someone.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Knows more in his pinky toe about Shakespeare than I do.
Oh, okay. I'm not showing you my feet. This is not a Tarantino show. So I enjoyed this, but I want to go back to something. As far as, as you mentioned, we do Shakespeare's plays to this day because they are stories and actions and behavior that we can all still relate to. So that's one. Another is what I love about stage and screen versions is how are they going to treat the material? Roman Polanski's treatment of this is different than Orson Welles's, is different than the dude who made Assassin's Creed, is different, which is the last one, really. That was a major film version, and is different than Scotland, PA, and it's different than Men of Respect. So what cutting they do of it intrigues me. I've always said there seems to be an unofficial agreement between certain movie studios, PBS, and the BBC of, okay, I'm going to do a film version of this novel or this play or this author like every 10 to 20 years. And you mentioned Ms. Gerwig with her adaptation of Little Women. It's unlike any other adaptation because it goes back and forth between Joe, the writer, and the stories that we lead into. So that and that was a very polarizing film as far as the adaptation. I loved it. So what I dug about this version, because generally Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, oh my God, I said the title of a play online. No curse. But the fact that you have Macbeth, who is much older. I mean, he's his age. And so I think the aspect of
65, just so people,
a very handsome 65, I might add, and Frances McDormand, who is ageless and gorgeous. But the fact that here's an older guy who, was supposed to be the heir to the throne, and it goes to the king's son. So the necessity to stay onto power and be lingered in and be talked into doing the deeds to get him the throne. That seems more intriguing to me than a 20-something Macbeth. I'm really happy Denzel got to do Shakespeare once again. This has been almost 30 years since he appeared in Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing, where he got to do Shakespeare and he got to do comedy, and he doesn't get enough to do either one of those. But I guess The Equalizer Part 8 is what helped get the August Wilson plays filmed, so more power to him.
yeah.
So that part of it I don't mind. But as far as the language, dude, you're a fan of Tolkien.
Yeah, but that's true. But I mean, and I've had this argument with our friend Lou Harry. He claims, maybe just because he's been a theater person his whole life, he claims he can sit there and listen to any Shakespeare thing and completely follow it. And I will freely admit, maybe I'm just not intellectually bent enough, but literally 80% of my energy watching this stuff is I'm trying to understand what they're saying.
It's a play, it's a film, it's not an exam.
Yeah.
So long as you're following it and you know what the characters are going through, nobody's asking you to translate it. You're not doing the closed captions.
Yeah, but see, for me, the experience of something where like where it's like it's in English, but in like really, really, twisted vowels Welsh. Where you're like,
that's my favorite band.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, it's a sort of movie that I think I would have done better with subtitles. I think reading it, I could have followed a little better because, of course, they're actors and they're saying this and what they're trying to do it in a natural cadence. But it just, and occasionally there's like historical references in there and things like that. It's like reading Dante's Inferno, where there's like this much deep of footnotes at the bottom of each page. It's like, well, this is a reference to a duke and the court of Agentime, and this is why he was portrayed this way, and that's what the reference really means. It's like here I'm going to make another lowbrow analogy. It's almost like I compare it to video games. Is a video game to me is only good when the interface is invisible, which is to say how you're controlling things after a certain amount of time disappears for you, and it's just about the game doing this, and it's your brain and interacting with it, and you're not thinking about what I'm doing with my hands to make it happen. And I think a lot of that is the same with film, is if you're not able to find a place where you're able to understand and have comprehension of what people are saying fairly easily without having to work too hard, there also automatically becomes this distance between the characters and the emotions and what's the human story that's going to be going on, because I'm spending too much of my brain power, such as it is, trying to just say, like, what is he saying? What does it mean? And that's not how, I don't think movies work well that way. I don't think you're able to, movies I think work best when they're primarily an emotional experience. And when I'm spending so much of my intellectual energy on the language and trying to get through it, it's like a thicket that I'm trying to get through to get to the actual movie and the story and the characters. I'm precluded from having those emotional responses. I'm not.
That's the great rebuttal. Just there. It's
But let me put it this way. You're a theater person, you've read or acted this stuff, probably hundreds of times in your life. Because you have that more familiarity with it, I think you already, it's like me like going and watching Lord of the Rings, which is a great thing to say because like I know that those books backwards and forwards. I know every reference, whereas I don't know what it's like for someone who's coming to that material for the first time and has to puzzle all those pieces in the language together.
It was funny because you're the strength of your passion of your argument. You make it sound like they're, I don't know, those superhero movies that come out every 6 months.
Yeah.
But it's not. The other thing I think that this has going for it, it's Macbeth is his shortest play, Shakespeare's shortest play, and this film clicks in at about an hour 45. So there.
I would not have wanted to see a 2.5 hour version of this.
No, I get it. I totally get it. And they all can't be Kenneth Branagh's 4-hour Hamlet, which is the entire play. And by the way, it justifies getting a nomination because it's what you do to adapt the material for the screen. Come at me. But no, this one really works at a nice pace as far as the actions, the deeds, and the not really spoiler alert on the final battle, but the final battle, which is done in a very narrow space and good use of CG that just made me laugh out loud because it kind of does. If you know the story, like how are they going to handle the deed of what happens at the end? And they just kind of went all out.
Yeah,
I think it's a restrained production. Denzel is an understated performance. There's only a couple of moments. I think people kind of look for the Denzel-isms, and no, he doesn't say Macduff ain't got shit on me, and he doesn't guarantee anything, but it's a very low-key performance. I know a few years ago he got to do Julius Caesar on Broadway, which I would love to see sometime. McDormand is solid as usual. Not a lot of chemistry between the two of them. And part of it is, I think, the adaptation. They don't get a lot of time together as a couple. So that's kind of lost. The only other Coen brother player I see in this, Chris, and he's got one great scene, is Stephen Root as the porter, which in your tragedies, you have to have comedic moments and vice versa. And the porter in Macbeth does that job. And it's fun to see Stephen Root at least get one scene in this. But everybody else is fairly, well, I'd have to look. I'm sure they're stage actors from England, and I have to look and see what else they've done. But those are the most familiar faces. But yeah, it's not a perfect film, but I'm glad they did it. And, like for the last film version of Macbeth I saw is the one with Michael Fassbender and Marion Cotillard, and it's different. Wasn't my favorite, but as I said before, I'm always intrigued with the setting and how you adapt it to the screen, which I still don't mind. If they're gonna make superhero movies every 6 months, I don't mind a film version of classic literature once, twice a year. I mean, it's not like the 90s. There was that big glut of Shakespeare films in the mid 90s, which was a great time for a 20-something film dork like myself.
Yeah. Well, I'll just leave it with this. Like to me, doing Macbeth or any of those plays right now, maybe it's because I'm older and I'm more stuck in my ways. But like when Kenneth Branagh was doing his movies, like in the age when he was like literally like 25, 27, 30 years old for those first three. I mean, it felt fresh and new to me. He shot it. He shot it like a movie. He didn't try to make a play on screen kind of version of it. And it felt interesting to me. Or even like the much derided Shakespeare in Love. You sort of like take the story behind the stories and did something interesting and innovative.
Okay, yeah,
I like that. But or even you mentioned Denzel Washington, who's actually committed to try and doing screen adaptations of all the August Wilson plays, which I don't know if those have been previously adapted for the screen. But
there's been a couple, but he's the Piano Lesson is one that especially comes to mind with Charles S. Dutton that was done, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s. So
those have been very vibrant for me. I've enjoyed those. I mean, again, it's like I think about Joel by association, Ethan Coen. I mean, they've been around for 40 years now almost. I think Blood Simple in '84 was their first produced film.
85.
Yeah. So, you're in your 60s now. You've got your Oscars. You can pretty much do, within reason. Unless you go to a studio and say I want $150 million, you can pretty much do whatever they want. And I
did.
But why do you want to do it?
Because he can. The same reason why dogs lick their elbows, because they can. Why not? My God, it's
I don't know. Well, to me, this is an example of, film critics, we should endeavor as much as possible to go to a film without our biases, and let the film come to us. But to me, that's not always going to be possible. And so to me, the solution to that, when I do go into an experience with biases, is to admit them up front.
I'm gonna counter with that for a moment. The other well, and I'll do it now because it's funny because I just watched a particular screener. There have been a number of films in the last few years which have been biopics about people that we are supposed to be sympathetic towards, and I'm still as I'm really kind of having a hard time. I, Tonya was an example, although that's a really well-made film and a really good performance from Margot Robbie and Allison Janney, who of course won the Oscar. I just finished watching The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and I'm sorry, she knew more. I think she knew more, and I think the high point for me is Oliver Stone's Shakespearean tragedy known as Nixon, because it almost made me feel sorry for Richard Nixon, almost, but not quite. And so that's one where, and there's been a number of pictures that have been coming out where we're supposed to look at somebody who has been vilified in the public eye or public opinion or in history and see their side of the story. And I'm like, I think they know a little more than they actually lead on, at least in this picture. And it's also based on a documentary. And if you're making a feature film based on a documentary, I make the Chris Lloyd Macbeth face. So,
well, I'll put as best a face on it as I can. I did not.
A very handsome mutton chop face, I might add. I was saying earlier, friends, this is his masterpiece audition. He looks fine. Get him a stovetop hat.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it's November, late November as we're recording this, and so I traditionally have done Movember, where you grow facial hair to aware awareness about prostate cancer and other men's illnesses. Hence the mutton chops. But yeah.
And to be fair, so I don't look like a heartless clod. I normally look like Peter Jackson's stunt double, but I just got done doing a play called Elizabeth Rex, where I've had a beard for almost a year. And well, frankly, my wife likes a smooth face when it comes to the smooching department. So
yeah, I don't know how some other people's significant others deal with the whiskers, because mine don't. But Denzel Washington's looks nice in Macbeth. I'll say that.
Yeah, he's handsome devil and very talented. It's got everything we don't.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Matthew. I appreciate you coming on here and arguing with your usual classiness and grace, and not telling me what a lowbrow idiot I am.
Not.
I appreciate that. We love doing these yap versus yaps, especially when there is a little bit more disconnect and discord, disagreement. Those are not bad things, as long as they can be talked out respectfully and had a great exchange of ideas. And I think we've had another great one.
Very cool, man. Good to see you. And yeah, I think this is opening Christmas Day.
Yeah.
So this, I know there's a number of films opening Christmas Day, but I think the bloodiest one I've seen on Christmas Day was The Hateful Eight. So this, not nearly as bloody as that, but Merry Christmas, everybody. Go see The Tragedy of Macbeth.
All right, we'll see you guys.